Regrettably, I'm about to cause trouble. Written and narrated by Amie McNee. Chapter 24. Christmas morning. The sun filtered through my bed curtains. In the blurry moments of first waking, I thought I was back in my bed at Sherburn, but these curtains were a deep red, not the green of my old home. I ran my fingers through my hair, and, as I untangled my curls, the last year of my life returned to me. I felt relief and excitement. I was at court on Christmas morning. I could hear the fire crackling outside, and I wondered who attended to it. I poked my head out of the curtains and saw Rufus's long body sprawled out on the floor, ashes dusting his livery. My heart wrenched. "Rufus," I whispered. He stirred. I got out of bed and reached down to him. "Rufus!" I brushed my hands through his hair. "Maude," he said, opening a single eye. "Come, get into bed." "I'm well. The floor is stone. You're not fine." I got him up, and he stiffly walked to my mattress. "Do you need to be anywhere this morning?" I asked. He sat down on the bed. "Not until after they break the fast," he said, still only one eye open. Gently, I pushed him back, and he submitted. I got him under the quilt. I sat on the end of the bed, over his feet, like a cat. To my abject horror, Jimmy had slept in between the witches last night, a betrayal I would never forget. "Merry Christmas, Maude." I turned around. He wasn't sleeping. He was staring at me. "Merry Christmas, Rufus," I smiled. "You don't want to sleep anymore?" "It's Christmas morning," he protested. "I am too excited to sleep." I laughed and got under the bedclothes at the other end of the bed, leaning my back against the post. Our legs touched. I wondered if he would move his away. I waited a few moments. He didn't. "Thank you for keeping the fire burning." "I couldn't let the Yuletide log burn out on Christmas Day," he grinned. He had a big cheesy grin that he used from time to time when he was being silly. It made him seem young as me, even though I knew it couldn't be true. I wondered what his actual age was. He must have been at least a decade older than I. "Where are you from?" I asked. "A long way away." "Did you celebrate Christmas in a long way away?" He shook his head. "Nay, but we celebrated in Spain. Princess Catherine used to give us gifts." "Do you miss her?" "I do. Not as much as I miss my mother, but I do miss her. She looked after me well." "Did you get to say goodbye to her?" "No, not to either of them. It was a delicate time in court. Catherine was kept out of sight, and when they took her from court, they took my mother too." "How come your mother was kept by Catherine, but you weren't?" "I am Henry's property." "He loves you, no? The king, I mean. It was surprising to see how he greeted you." "You find me all the more shiny and attractive now, don't you?" He wiggled his eyebrows. God damn it, I hated myself for him being a tiny bit right. "How did you become such good friends?" "When I was young, my main job was to keep out of the way. I would roam around the palace, stay out of sight. So would he. As a naughty child. We would play, climb, make mischief together." "I can hardly fathom it," I muttered. "Do you mind being back here?" "I was scared to return. He has a bad temper. I promise you the reason I am in his favour now is only because we caught him in a good mood. If he had had a bad cup of wine a moment before, he might have chosen to hold a grudge. It is unnerving. But I like Hampton Court. It is not where I grew up." "Have you seen your wife?" I asked. "No, she was not a woman of court. Have you seen your husband?" "Not yet, but I saw my parents." "What happened?" "My father stared at his lap, and my mother... she looked afraid." "It's difficult, Maude." I made a noise of agreement. "Will I get to spend time with you today?" "Not today, but tonight, after the feast, we are allowed to celebrate on our own, unless you're asked to entertain." "Who is we?" "The motley lot. Jane, Goodfatcher, some of the musicians, Summers, of course, all the witches. It will be festive." "I look forward to it." "Me too." Hildy burst in, holding my cat. Both of us jumped. "Merry Christmas, lovebirds," she said excitedly, flinging open the bed curtains. "Merry Christmas, Hildy," I replied, taking my baby betrayer back. Zita followed her in. "Happy Yuletide, children." Zita was glowing. "Let's get ready for the day." "Leave them a while, Zita," said Hildy coyly. Rufus and I shared a quick glance. We weren't tupping. We didn't need a while. I slipped out of bed. "You must promise not to leave me behind today." "Well, we will certainly be in each other's company for the first 3 masses. Zita passed me my dresses. 3 masses, Jesus. "In his name," said Hildy, fussing over my hair. "If we are invited to the Royal Chapel, you will like it." "Like it? Mass?" I asked incredulously. She nodded. When do we get to break the fast? Not until after midday. You'll get drunk very quickly. You need to be careful. I'm not being careful on Christmas. That's the spirit, said Hildy. I was unsure if she had read my lips correctly. A lot of the courtiers had to leave Hampton Court on Christmas Day to attend Mass outside of the King's Palace because Hampton Court Chapel could only take so many. Zita spent the morning tempering my hopes, constantly reminding me that we would most likely have to leave the court too. The chances are minuscule, Maude, she said for the 1000th time. There was a knock at the door, a knock I recognised, the same melody of knocking that William Summers had used the day before. Where to today, Summers? Zita asked promptly. You've been summoned to Hampton Court Chapel. He made a quick bow and left. I couldn't contain myself. You're a bloody sycophant, Maude, Zita said, helping me thread a few pearls into my hair. I had noble blood. It was hard to unlearn the delight of social ascension. We stood at the back of a packed chapel royal. Zita had been right. I was an aesthetic person. I liked beauty. I liked it in nature, I liked it in people, in my dresses, in my own face, and I liked it in the chapel royal. The ceiling, like the night sky, like Zita's rooms, but far superior. According to the whispers around me, Henry had only just finished it. It felt like a tapestry, draping down upon us with folds of gilt faults. My neck hurt from my stargazing, but I couldn't help examining each glittering celestial sparkle individually. When I finally tore my eyes away from the heavens, I fell in love with the floor. It was checkered black and white, and the sounds of the courtiers moving over it in their finest clothing was so satisfying, a cheery clinking, accompanied by the swish of expensive materials against the marble. Then the walls were the deepest, darkest oak panelling, and if I stuck my head out into the aisle, I could see the sparkle of the candles that ran along each row of the pews. We were crammed in, but that only made it more exciting. I could feel a sort of, erotic tension. The courtier standing behind me was alluring. He had floppy hair and bright blue eyes. I could feel him pressing up against my back, and I didn't mind it. I think it was the Christmas spirit. Not that I was used to this sort of Christmas spirit. Normally Yuletide reminded me of being young, of being in my white nightgown running around Sherburn. This Christmas spirit was electric and sinful. I preferred it. I saw Rufus take his place at the top of the church. He seemed totally relaxed, laughing with the other musicians, taller than anyone, darker than everyone. He just stood out. I looked around to see if anyone else was looking at him, and they were. Quite a lot of women were looking at him. None of those women had shared a bed with him this morning. Rufus raised the trumpet to his lips. They had arrived. The king looked like God himself had come down to celebrate his son's birth. The queen also looked beautiful, but she looked tired too. Her clothes were made to accentuate the presumably tiny bump of her belly. She caught my eye upon entry, and she smiled. I liked her, despite the stories. The little Princess Elizabeth, only 2 years old, had toddled in with her governess behind her parents. Not particularly maternal in nature, I'd never been taken by a child, but Elizabeth captivated me. She was like a tiny angel, with the most delightful hair I'd ever seen, curly like mine, but fire red, brighter than her papa's. During the boring proceedings, there was a lot of shuffling of bottoms on seats, children giggling, and I saw, on more than one occasion, the glint of a flask and the chink of a not-so-covert chalice. I was entertained the whole time, bouncing between the feeling of the codpiece in my back and watching Rufus in the front. It would be so nice to try tapping again with someone who wasn't a prig, and without covering my mark. I felt the blue-eyed man's mouth at my ear, and my whole body flushed with blood. "Will you carry my beans, witch?" he whispered, loudly. A few of his mates laughed. "That flap-sucking bean story. But forsooth, you must move aside, I want a better view." He pushed past me. I caught Rufus's eye and put all my energy into singling out the sound of his instrument. I wish everyone else would just shut up. I wanted to hear him play. The court spent the better half of the morning swooning in and out of the chapel and courtyards and the gallery. Despite what Zita had said about breaking the fast at the first feast, there was much drinking and nibbling of festive snacks. Roasted chestnuts, dried fruits and plums, the air smelt of cinnamon and wine. I spent half my time in pure delight and the other half being knocked out of my reverie. I was shoved around a lot, physically shoved. I was asked for the on-the-spot charms in fortune-telling. And worse than all that, I was asked to carry people's beans at least a dozen more times, once by Thomas Cromwell, which both delighted me and mortified me. He's very drunk, Maude. He's normally a very respectable gentleman, Hildy assured me. By the third mass of the day, my Christmas spirit was gone. Vanished. Zita kept passing me dried pieces of apple, but they made my tummy hurt. Eat up, Maude. You'll be dead on your feet. Feast is next, isn't it? I asked as the trumpets began to sound again, the king entering again. Feast is for courtiers, Maude, Hildy said, shoving a few warm chestnuts into my hand. I've never considered myself to be a stupid person. When you grow up in a noble household, you automatically know yourself to be smarter than anyone else. I mean, I could read, for God's sake, both English and Latin, and I had picked them up quickly, too. I had taken to Hildy's hand-signalling swiftly, and I knew things about herbs and the properties of plants, and I was even learning more about the stars, which was an erudite profession. Not to mention the fact I was 50% sure that I could read people's fucking minds. But I really hadn't been using all my faculties when I had imagined we were to attend the royal Christmas Day feast. What had I been expecting? A seat by the king? Because I had told a good ghost story? I suppose I had thought, it was Christmas. Christmas Day. What? Were we supposed to go without eating? On Yuletide? I had been staring absent-mindedly at some poor courtier's arse this entire time, processing both my own stupidity and the stupidity of the situation, which would be for us a Christmas Day without a Christmas feast.